So you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jackson with Jackson number 31. In case you guys aren't aware, we are doing Charles Jackson from like 30 years ago, talking about like human evolution and all sorts of nonsense like that. I am joined, of course, by the one, the only Jackson Sorghum. Wait. Jackson Oat? Rye? Wheat! It's wheat! Jackson Wheat! Jackson! I got your name right. How you doing?
Close enough. I'm doing fine.
That's
I'm hanging
good.
in there.
That's good.
Same old, same old.
All right. Well, before we really get into things, we've got a few drinks to take already. Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra gifted 5 memberships. They went to Sergey, maybe Sergey, Hachko, William Pye, Traumatic Insemination, Chris Peacock, Sable Eagle. So let's take 5 drinks for that. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I gotta say, my drink today tastes a whole lot like the refreshing flavor of Mountain Dew Baja Blast. Not a sponsor, because I managed to get my hands on some hard Mountain Dew Baja Blast. So that's what I'm drinking right now. Also, for $2, Goop Dude 3 says, Sparkle on, it's Wednesday. And for $4.99, Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller says, is Dapper truly a profession? I mean, technically, yes. Technically, yes. All right. We have the tracker back for donations. So you guys can see how close we are to getting a fancy avatar, or even forcing me to put on my human suit and wear a tutu on camera. Rael Gatvello, I think, for $2 says, Respondoi en genezo esta saco de cacoi, which of course is Esperanto for answers in Genesis is a bag of dicks. So we'll take a drink for that. And that is their 3rd super chat. So thank you very much. And then Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Color for $1.99 says, see, I told you hard Baja Blast existed. I mean, I believed you after you sent me evidence, right? It's just, was I going to be able to get a hold of it? Because, who knows where they sell it? Turns out, the grocery store. Let's see. So, let's actually go through the drinking rules. So, as we take a look at the nonsense of Dr. Charles Jackson, we will, of course, be coughing a lot, but also occasionally taking drinks. The drinks will trigger on certain events. Now, you've already seen a few ways you guys can trigger drinks. For instance, by super chatting anything to the effect that AIG are a bag of dicks. Gifting memberships. We'll take a drink for each gifted membership up to a certain point, in which case that's around 30. If I have 30 drinks to take for that, I'm just going to finish the drink I have, add 30 to the counter, and grab another drink. We will also take a drink if Charles Jackson says something that's just so stupid we kind of have to prevent our brains from melting. We'll also take a drink if Dr. Jackson gets something actually factually correct. If he, tells a joke that didn't land, or a story that didn't happen. So, for instance, if he tells a story that sounds way more like the argument that he had with a shampoo bottle than an argument he had with a real-life professor from Berkeley or something, we'll take a drink. It is a judgment call, but you know what? I feel pretty comfortable with my judgment on this, especially since it doesn't really matter. There's no consequence to this. We will also take a drink if Dr. Charles Jackson mentions that German political party that was prominent in like the 1930s and 40s that may have precipitated a global conflict, a global armed conflict, if you will. The second such conflict in which Germany was on the losing side. Because they're 0-2. Maybe next time, Germany. Maybe next time. Let's see. We will take a drink if Dr. Charles Jackson mixes up what we can know about Australopithecus, or any other wider genus to which the species Australopithecus afarensis belonged, including that species itself. If he mixes up what we can know from Lucy, the one specimen, with what we can know about any wider taxons, such as those named, we will take a drink for ad hominid. Only once per stream, though. We will also take a drink if Dr. Charles Jackson mentions a source. We check that source, and rather than not just supporting his contention, which is going to be almost always the case, if it actively contradicts his contention, then we call that a Trojan source, and we take a drink. We'll also take a drink if either Jackson or I can predict what's coming up next in Dr. Charles Jackson's arguments. We'll also take a drink if I screw up the production. So, for instance, if I mute myself or Jackson inappropriately, if I press the wrong button, if I go to the wrong scene, things like that, right? Production errors. Now, crashes on the part of programs, that doesn't work. That doesn't count. So, for instance, the donations tracker. That thing right now is running in an instance of Blender. If Blender crashes, that's not a production error. That's just a crash. Let's see. Also, if you super chat or membership milestone chat anything with the kaiju emojis, that's Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, that you can only get by being a member, you can join down below. We will take a drink for that. And I think that covers it. Jackson, do you think I've covered it?
I think so. It sounds right.
Okay. Well, there's also audible Mothra and Godzilla, but I'm not expecting that. They don't come up all that often. So anyway, when we were last here, Charles Jackson was telling us why every single transitional fossil isn't actually transitional for very bad reasons, mostly having to do with the idea that they're almost certainly not directly ancestral to Homo sapiens, and so therefore, for some reason, they're not transitional, which is not how transitional works. But we'll get into more detail if he gets into more detail. Jackson, I'm not going to ask if you're ready, because no one is ever ready to suffer through Charles Jackson. But what I will say is, are you likely to become more ready in the next few seconds?
I don't know. Probably, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if I've ever had to think about it that way. I don't think I could be any more ready in the future than I am currently.
Then that means you're as ready as you can be, and here we go.
True.
Well, if they're surely on their way, wouldn't they be before the dinosaurs?
Yes. So this is Dinosauriformes and Dinosauromorphs being before the dinosaurs versus after. And so the answer is basically no. So let's see, real quick. Jesse Ven's Spiker Milet for $5 says, AIG is indeed a huge bag of donks or dorks. I mean, the term for a whale's vestigial hip-anchored member. Well, my guest here, or co-host, I should say, knows all about that.
Do I?
So there's a drink for that. Yes, in fact, you do know. You are the YouTube's foremost expert on whale intromittent organs.
Oh, that is a detriment both to my reputation and society writ large.
I don't think so. I think it's a fascinating topic, Jackson, hence why you made that in-depth video.
I sure did make a video about it at the behest of two very drunk Canadians.
Yes, you did. And I, for one, appreciate that.
It is over twice the views of the next. It is, yeah, the highest viewed video on my channel being over twice the number of views as the next highest watched video, which I think is quite funny.
Jackson, I think I know what you need to do to grow your channel considerably. You need to start making the penis series.
Oh.
Just pick, throw a dart at like a dartboard covered with like just taxa names. And then whichever one it hits, you have to go and look at how that taxon does internal fertilization, which means that's how you pick which taxa you put on the board, right? Only ones that do internal fertilization. And then you go into all of the male anatomy used in that organism in detail.
So the only other video I can think that I can remember offhand, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, because I do forget things. I did a video on the baculum, which is the penis bone.
Yes.
And I believe that's the only other like sexual organ related video that I've done. Now we've done a number of videos on sexual selection. We did the peacock's tail, where we talked about sexual selection in the context of like a female mate choice. So
Yes.
why do male birds have such pretty colors? And it's because females have a preference for particular colors, and there's kind of a debate as to like, well, is it because they just happen to like certain colors, or is there like do these colors communicate something about the males, virility or what have you? And so there's kind of an interesting debate over that actually goes all the way back to like Darwin and Wallace. They disagreed over this. Darwin was like, no, if the female birds just kind of like it because the colors are pretty, and Wallace kind of won out for like almost 100 years. Really, it wasn't until the like countercultural revolution of the like 60s and 70s, which, lest anyone ever tell you that scientists are all robots and cultures never factors into the science. Like what you had the countercultural revolution, the idea of aesthetic mate choice, which I should say Fisher also kind of championed it in like the 1930s, but he was kind of a lone wolf in that regard. Then it kind of came back into vogue, and now it's a lot more well regarded than it used to be. It was kind of just brushed off, like females. They're not just choosing because it's pretty. This must be a sign that the male has very high quality sperm or is good at, I don't know, lifting sticks or something. So anyway, sorry.
No, it's all right. We have a couple super chats. We have DM Original In Situ Academic Excavation Wing, who for $2 says, if human evolved from monkey, why is there still monkey? With an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji, and I will take a drink for that. Thank you. We also have Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller, who says for $1.99, good Jackson, make a video on barbed hemipenes. There you go. There's another option for you.
Barbed hemipenes. My next video is going to have penis worms in it. So
almost the same. Also, Kip Davis says, after several days of soul-crushing engagement with Amon Hillman fans, I need something light. 2 days ago, sorry. My younger brother actually sent me a podcast of Amon Hillman saying absolutely bonkers nonsense about the New Testament. And my brother was like, hey, what's your take on this? And I had to call him because I wasn't going to text all of this. But basically, I went through like 5 or 6 reasons why Hillman is just completely off his rocker. So let's see. We have 5 memberships purchased by Joshua Geese. Let's see. They went to Sydney Raptor himself, Darth Studicus, Captain Butt, David Berry, and I believe that is it. So here's 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For $5, Brian Finish Drink says, good Jackson, can tell us if there is indeed an animal that has a 7-branched candlestick. Jackson, are you aware of any animals with such an organ? I am not.
No, the only ones I can think of are like monotremes. So platypus and echidna have, I think it's 4-branched. But only the left side works because only the female's left ovaries work. So
Bandelli 1998 for $5 says, only internal fertilization? Where's the love for amphibian and fish lovemaking? Well, they don't have anything reasonably analogous to a penis, so nothing against that.
Well, some fish, some do internal fertilization. Like if you're referring to like chondrichthyans, which I think are fish, they do internal fertilization.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's what they have their little claspers for. The aquarium, we have bamboo sharks, and the the males are always basically telling the females like, hey, come on over, and the females most of the time say, no, I'd rather not.
Oh, also, I've been asked if there's no drink counter. Nope, there's a drink counter right on screen. I don't know what to tell you. All right, by the way, yeah, as someone points out, this is basically the if humans evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys argument, but applied to dinosaurs. If dinosaurs evolved from Dinosauriformes, then why are there still Dinosauriformes alongside dinosaurs?
Where?
Because you don't know how evolution works. The wider group of Dinosauriformes does not need to go extinct for dinosaurs to exist. For instance, if I said, hey, if seahorses come from Signathiformes, then why are there still trumpetfish, which are a different kind of Signathiform? I don't know how to answer that question other than to say that the whole order of Signathiformes doesn't have to go extinct except for seahorses in order for seahorses to exist. That's just how evolution works. So, yeah. Now, I will also say that our earliest Dinosauriformes do come before our earliest dinosaurs. Just that throughout the Triassic, there were non-dinosaur Dinosauriformes. It's just that was not the case after the end Triassic extinction. After which, they all went extinct.
Isn't it crazy how that works, Dapper? How like the wider group that contains dinosaurs was like around before dinosaurs? Isn't that wild?
No, actually, it's exactly
almost like evolution or something.
Yeah, it's exactly what you might expect. For $4.99, Rosina Apophenia says, does the anglerfish setup count as internal fertilization? That would be a
Not-
great question. I don't actually know.
It's just blatant like parasitism. I mean, no, I guess it. So typically, when we say internal fertilization, right, we refer to using an intermittent organ, which is obviously not what male anglerfish are doing. They're like fusing to the female. So I suppose, in a sense, you could say, but like, I mean, you could say it like reasonably, because the fertilization is kind of happening, I guess, kind of in between them. But like, that's not typically how I use the term. But I think it's reasonable to say that.
Okay. Dutch Tunicate Official for $2 says, playing with some of my homebrew mead. Ooh, that sounds really good. Although my preference for mead is hard to meet, right? Because commercially available meads are almost always on the sweet side, but I really prefer a dry mead. So I almost never really have meads that are like tailored to my tastes. Vandalia 1998 for $5 says, if mammals came from cynodonts, why are there still cynodonts? I mean, other than mammals, there really aren't, but it works just as well because, you know, the first true mammals were around with other non-mammal relatives that were also cynodonts. All right, here we go. Here's some more Charles Jackson.
Wouldn't they be before and not with them? The entire
No, they'd be both. They would be both, which they are, which is great.
area around the site is where other scientists have found dinosaurs and their precursor relatives in different layers too, but never so abundantly and so clearly side by side as in this new fossil find. What would Darwin do?
I really
would be
hate
like,
that.
wow, this is exactly what I expected, I guess.
Yeah, a stunning confirmation of my predictions. That's probably what Darwin would do.
Yeah.
Or say, I suppose.
WDD. Okay, what would Darwin do? These questions will continue to puzzle the team during next year's dig and for many years to come. Well, that's just too bad. And I always like to end my post, you keep thinking. Keep thinking.
I love how this, like, clearly written as, like, sort of, like, primitive clickbait article is something that he's like, oh my goodness, this is a stunning admission from evolutionary scientists who now admit that maybe the relatives of a lineage can persist after that particular lineage under consideration that might be more famous evolves. Like, yup, that sure is a stunning admission of very boringly ordinary evolutionary biology that is just the way evolution works.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Darwin said specifically that, like, parental lineages don't have to go extinct when daughter lineages are formed to daughter species. Like, I'm pretty sure that was a thing he said. So,
I mean, it sounds like something he would say.
Keep thinking. You see, you're allowed to think and be a Christian. A lot of people think you gotta...
No, you can't. It's not allowed. That's why we gotta get Maddie out of here, because she's thinking too much, and she's a Christian.
You know, be dead from the neck up to be a Christian, to be a Bible believer.
Look, I don't think you have to be an idiot or a completely illogical person or something to be a Christian. I do think that certain varieties of Christian require you to just blatantly ignore reality that is extremely easily demonstrable. But I don't think that's true of all of them. So, and like, sure, there are aspects of Christianity that I don't think are easily demonstrable. But that's very different from very easily demonstrably incorrect, right?
mm-hmm.
So, like,
mm-hmm.
if you want to tell me that there's historical evidence for, say, the resurrection, I mean, there isn't, right? There isn't. As a historian, I can't say that the resurrection is a part of history. Now, that doesn't technically mean it didn't happen, because most of the things that have ever happened aren't part of history, because there's no historical evidence for them.
Right.
But I can tell you that there are historical explanations for the rise of Christianity that do not require there to be a resurrection. And as a historian, you can't really ever conclude that that is the most likely explanation, because it's honestly not from the historical standpoint. That means that doesn't have to mean anything to your Christian faith. But on the other hand, I can say with extremely high confidence that not only is the flood not part of history, it simply didn't happen. We know exactly what evidence that would leave behind, and we find it contraindicated every single place where we could possibly check. It is physically impossible, according to most flood models proposed by creationists. The flood, as Charles Jackson believes it, absolutely did not happen. I don't think that has to mean that you can't be a Christian. In fact, I would note that most Christians agree with me there. Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for 1999 says, I think a lot of this is, if X evolved from Y, then why is there still Y? Nonsense comes from the incorrect belief that evolution has a goal, and evolution means organisms always getting inarguably gooder. I agree with you. I think that is really where a lot of this comes from. Yeah, I can't disagree. All right, I'm going to hit play.
You realize that our faith is the only one that commands you to question? Commands you to question. And other...
I would need a citation. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about every religion out there, but I'm pretty sure that other ones also encourage inquiry, just broadly speaking.
Religions, it's a sin to question your faith. What does the Bible say? Test me, try me, prove me, taste and see if the Lord is not good.
Okay, if that's all we mean, first I'm going to take a drink. Like, more than once per chapter, the Quran basically is always saying, hey, look, here's a test you can apply to the Quran to see that it's totally from God. Now, I happen to think that most of the tests are laughably dumb. Like, the poetry involved in the Quran is so superlative that it couldn't have come from a human. And I'm like, I don't even see how that follows, but whatever. But it's at least asking you to, like, test and see, and it's providing tests that you can conduct that, at least allegedly, are supposed to indicate that the Quran is the one true word of God. So, when Charles Jackson says that Christianity is the only religion that has any interest in having people test it, I mean, he's just flatly wrong. Kerry Bronson, for $5, says, would there be fewer misconceptions about evolution in the absence of the Pokemon franchise? I doubt it, because Pokemon really was just capitalizing on already existing and pervasive misunderstandings of evolution. And I don't think it originated those. And while you might say maybe it spread it, I mean, the only reason that it was the way it was is because those misconceptions were already widespread anyway. So yeah, I don't think so. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just have rose-colored glasses for Pokemon Red and Blue.
See if I will not bless you, shaken down and pressed together, a good measure overflowing. God's not scared of questions. He can take it. The truth can take examination. I'm not talking about questions that are designed to destroy knowledge.
You know, if that were true, I feel like Charles Jackson wouldn't lie as much as we found him doing in this series. What do you think there, Jackson?
Yeah, he definitely doesn't seem to support that hypothesis himself.
Also, Ray El Gatubello with what is apparently a third super chat. I think you might just be stuck on third super chat. It says Matthew 4:7, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." I mean, that is Matthew 4:7. Although I would be willing to entertain the idea that tempting is not the same thing as inquiring. Although I could also entertain arguments that they are the same thing. So, asked a traumatic in Navy soldier Asian Ryu for 199 says, Pokemon Red and Blue, isn't that unbiblical? Joking. You know what? It might be. But my very Christian parents were okay with me getting Pokemon Blue, I believe, and then I think my brother got Red. So, and I think my other brother got, like, Yellow.
Like that foolish question, if God has all power, then does he have enough power to create a rock so large that he cannot lift it? And the atheist
Wasn't that, like, invented by Christians, though?
I don't know. I think it was, actually.
I think that was a paradox invented by Christians, though. Like, that wasn't invented by an atheist.
I do want to see why he thinks it's dumb, because I also think it's dumb, but it might be for different reasons.
Gotcha there. You know what this reflects? An inability to comprehend infinity.
What? No, it reflects a misunderstanding of the potential definitions of omnipotence. But let's let him go a little bit more.
You see, no human can comprehend infinity. And so we must not lay this finite box on top of God, because it's just not true. What? Measuring the quantity of energy and the size of things God can create is irrelevant to an infinite being. It does not apply. It's like asking you, sir, if your girdle fits well, or you know, I don't know. It doesn't apply to you. I mean, unless you're really disguised well. Okay, it just doesn't apply.
I'm going to go ahead and say that was a joke that didn't land, even though apparently someone found it funny. I'm also going to take a drink for how bad he is at this. So, here's the thing. The question of whether or not God can make a boulder or a rock so big that he can't lift it is actually a question not about God so much as it is about what we mean by omnipotence if we assume that God is omnipotent, which is the general position of most Abrahamic religions. Omnipotence could mean, well, Rosina Apophenia Surfer Keller for 199 says, what is infinite? That is a great question, and we will get to that after I talk about the can God lift a boulder question. So, omnipotence is broadly defined as able to do anything, but that comes with nuances. There's two big options here. One is able to do anything which is logically consistent, but unable to do things which are logically inconsistent. If that's what omnipotence means, then you could also ask the question, could God make a circle with 4 sides? And the answer would be no, because a triangle definitionally has 3 sides. So anything that has more sides is not a triangle, even if God likes to pretend that it is. Okay. The other option is that, in fact, omnipotence does allow you to do things that are logically impossible, and the fact that they don't seem to make sense and are internally inconsistent doesn't matter. In which case, God can make a triangle with 4 sides. And the fact that you think the triangles have 4 sides doesn't help. It's still a triangle with 4 sides. Okay, so how does this apply to the boulder? If God is omnipotent and cannot do contradictory things, then the question is there a finite size of boulder that is too much for such an omnipotent being to make, and subsequently move? The answer seems like it would be no. So the answer to the question is no. If God can do contradictions, then, interestingly enough, what that means is God can make a boulder that's so big that he can't lift it, even if that doesn't mean anything, and then he can lift it anyway, because again, he can do logically contradictory things. So really, all you're asking with this question is, what definition of omnipotence are you using? It doesn't actually help you determine if there is a God. It barely helps you determine what kinds of things he could do. And it certainly isn't a defeater for the idea of omnipotence in the first place, because really, even if you think that the allowing for internal contradictions option is nonsense, you can just opt for the non-allowing of contradictions, in which case the answer is just no, and you just leave it there, and it doesn't defeat omnipotence. I don't know why that's so hard for Charles Jackson to get through. I mean, this is a man who brags about his multiple degrees and his PhD, and yet...
And his Mensa membership.
Yeah, it's Mensa membership. And yet, this guy can't figure out how to answer the can God make a boulder so big he can't lift it question in a coherent way. That's just kind of pathetic. Now, I know I am falling behind. Rosina Apophenia Sucker Keller for 199 says, what is infinite? One interesting way to think about infinity is as a set that has no finite size. So, for instance, if I said, how big is the set of all numbers that are positive whole numbers? Well, no matter how many positive whole numbers you think of, I can come up with one that's at least one bigger than that, right? No matter how big a number you pick. I can always add one to it and get a bigger one. Therefore, that is a series that is infinite, or a set that is infinite. When it comes to reality, you might say that maybe the universe is infinite in size, which means that the set of possible locations that you could be in space, or more accurately, the set of fixed distances from a particular point in space that you could reach, given no limit in time, would be infinite, because you could always go a little bit farther. Whereas if the size of the universe is finite, then there is a certain farthest distance that you could go from a particular point, and you could not reach a farther distance. Now, that might mean you hit some kind of edge. It might mean that you loop back in on yourself because the universe is closed. I don't know. So that is a reasonable definition for infinite. This isn't a math channel, so I mean, if you really want a much more rigorous definition, I would just ask a mathematician. Kerry Bronson for $2 says, limiting God to human scales is all you do, Jack. I mean, yeah, that is a lot of creationism, isn't it? is just telling God what he can and can't do because of what a literal interpretation of certain parts of Genesis say. Sean, who's been a member for 12 months and was at the amniote level, says, I love the arrogant tone he's using as if his brain wouldn't melt trying to understand in differently sized infinities with a Godzilla and a Mothra. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there are differently sized infinities. I'll take a drink. Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, could Jesus microwave a burrito so hot that not even he could hold it? Yes, but once the hot burrito comes into existence, he gains the power to hold it. See, there, Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller is probably going with the option for omnipotence of allowing for internal contradictions, which is a definition you can adopt if you want to. I don't particularly care, because I'm not really a theologian. However, I will say that Jackson here, Bad Jackson, is a bad theologian. I don't know if Good Jackson is a good theologian. I've never heard Good Jackson talk about theology.
I'm definitely not a theologian, and not a good one especially.
And
so don't follow me for theology advice.
Okay.
Applying finite thinking to an eternal, infinite God doesn't work. The question is flawed. Or like, where did Cain get his wife? Or what about the second creation story in the Bible? Just look at these kinds of things.
What about them, dude? Those are actually good questions, right? Because one of the things is, Cain seems to travel to a faraway land and then happens to find a wife there. But in the narrative, Cain and Abel are basically portrayed as the second and third humans that exist. And then after the story of Cain and Abel, it says Adam and Eve had many more sons and daughters. So it doesn't actually seem like there's a population off in the distance of Adam and Eve's descendants anywhere. And that's because this is actually a third story being worked into the Genesis narrative, that it is not presenting Adam and Eve as necessarily the first ever humans, but perhaps as maybe the first two humans to have some kind of covenant with the God that would later be identified as the God of Israel. And so, yeah, and also when it comes to the second creation narrative, the order of events isn't the same. God creates humans first in Genesis 2, and then he creates the other animals afterwards. And then he has, in Genesis 1, God creates man and woman together. In Genesis 2, he creates Adam, and then Adam goes through at least a day or so before Eve is created. These are not all the same story. And you have to deal with these things. You can't just say, well, you're just not thinking the way God wants you to think. Even if that's true, that doesn't help someone sincerely seeking questions, which is kind of weird, given that Charles Jackson just said that Christianity encourages you to ask these questions. Well, then maybe, Bad Jackson, you should have answers for these that aren't just hand-waving dismissals. My Unfinished Journey for $5 says, I counter Bad Jackson's pseudoscience with my pseudo-hypothesis that Good Jackson is secretly Canadian, as evidenced by saying process as process. Good Jackson, how do you answer this charge that you are in fact a secret Canadian?
I have switched back and forth between pronunciations. I don't know, man. I don't say that anymore. I just say process. I also say math instead of... Wait, no, do the Canadians say math or maths?
I think they say math.
Okay, never mind. Well, okay. Maybe I am Canadian. Who knows?
Okay.
Honorary Canadian, I guess.
I've had people ask if I'm Canadian, but it's usually just because they can't place my accent, and not because they place me as Canadian.
There's no way anyone hears my accent and thinks, he is Canadian for sure.
We're allowed to question. Read, study to see if these things be so. Be like the Bereans and study. Look and see. Oh, there's so many flaws in the Bible, so many contradictions. Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of contradictions in the Bible. You don't have to think that that's a defeater for Christianity. I don't really care. I don't think that Christians are required to pretend that there are no contradictions anywhere in the Bible, in part because the idea of the infallibility of the Bible is a fairly recent thing in Christianity. Like, most Christians thought the basic narrative of the Bible was true, but, they've long recognized that not everything lines up 100%. That's why there were so many gospel harmonies, because people knew that the gospels didn't quite line up with each other. And in order to tell a single coherent narrative of Jesus' life, you would have to come up with a synthesis of them. And there were many very popular gospel syntheses throughout Christian history. Rael Gatubello, which with something that is not a third super chat, so alright, not stuck, says, Good Jackson is just trying to get into the good graces of apology of Vice Rhino and Logic. That's right. You're just simping.
I mean,
for
I
the
was on
Canadians.
Apologia's channel a few weeks ago, so maybe that's true. Vice Rhino, like we've interacted. We've never talked on stream to each other. We've interacted on Twitter a few times, though.
I did a guest video for him once.
I also did that. Yes, that's right. I also did a guest video for him. Yeah, that's right. And then who's the other one? Logic.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever interacted with Logic.
I talked with Logic on Discord.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Paul is really the only one, the one I've spent the most interacting with of those, and it's really like once. It's like maybe once a year, something like that. So not very often.
I still find it weird that I was watching with all of the time he first watched a Hellraiser movie, and it was the most recent one, the remake.
That's pretty funny. I met RJ through Paul. So, well, what's funny is I met Paul through Tony Reed. So I was a fan of Tony Reed, and then Tony Reed does a thing at the end of each like season of his releases where he covers like errata, and then other channels you should check out. So I was like, okay. So he put up Paul, and so I was like, all right, I'll check this guy out. And then Paul did the video with RJ, and then I met RJ shortly thereafter. So yeah, and then we produced The Rocks Were There. So yeah, that's how that all started.
Which means, Jackson, you got to come out to Arizona sometime so I can have my copy signed by both authors.
Fair. And balance.
Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller for 1999 says the plot hole in Kane's wife doesn't exist in the source material. I'm not sure what that means. As in the source material? The Epic of Gilgamesh, where Enkidu is one of many humans. Plot holes are what you get when you plagiarize your creation myth poorly. Well, the thing is, I don't actually think that this is reasonably termed a plagiarism. For one thing, I don't really think you can plagiarize myths because they're not really copyrighted. So they're just folk tales that eventually sometimes
God's
get
name
down
at the bottom.
Yeah. But the other thing is that this story wasn't written as part of a coherent narrative running from Genesis 1 all the way through the Cain and Abel story. It's part of a third narrative that has been later added in to this whole text that was compiled by some kind of redactor. Because Genesis is not the work of a single author starting at the beginning and writing through a narrative. It is a collection.
Whoa. You're saying Moses did in fact not write Genesis?
That is correct. Moses did in fact not write Genesis.
Oh my gosh.
So
you're saying that's blasphemy.
The contradictions are less a result of poor copying of other myths and more a result of a collection of myths that were not always internally consistent, but that were collected and put into a text with some bridging material to try to tie them together into a narrative that is only partially successful. For 499, Astrotraumatic in Navy Soldieration Ryu says, before I learned how to pronounce the English R sound, I had people think I was a New Yorker because my speech impediment apparently sounds like any non-rhotic dialect. That is interesting. I can see how that might happen, yeah. That makes sense to me.
Yes, lots of them? Yeah, so many. Do you know any of them? Oh, I have lots. I know lots of them. Yeah, well, give me one.
Okay. Here's
the
one.
Matthew Luke birth narrative, or the birth years.
Yep. When was Jesus born? What day of the week was Jesus crucified? How many angels were there at the tomb? Who got to the tomb first? Did the people who got to the tomb tell anyone, or did they keep it secret? Let's see. We've already mentioned contradictions between Genesis 1 and 2. I mean, we could keep going, but I mean, there's a few. There's some relatively big ones, or I don't even know if they're big. How did Judas die? Did Judas hang himself, or did he fall face first onto the ground and have his belly split open in a callback to Maccabean literature about what might happen to the people who betray God? It's not really both. And you can say, well, maybe, he hanged himself and then later on he fell down after someone cut him down and then yeah, okay. That is not the most likely reading of the he fell down and his belly split open reading. That is a very stretched reading. And if your response to a contradiction is like, well, if I twist the word into some kind of weird hyperdimensional pretzel, then I can kind of make it seem like the contradiction isn't absolutely necessary. I'm sorry, you just still have a contradiction. That's just where that is. I mean, you can do your interdimensional pretzel twisting with the words of the Bible to pretend that there's not a contradiction. But that's not convincing to anyone who hasn't already decided that no matter what, there are no contradictions. Because that's what a lot of these responses to contradictions are. They're just things that no one would believe unless they were already ideologically committed to the idea that there are no contradictions. For $5, Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra says, did Gilgamesh get his story checked by the copyright? I bet he didn't. What a loser. Thank you.
Give me one. And I go, oh, well, I can't pick. Go ahead. Don't pick the best one. Just give me one. The one that comes off.
This is a story that didn't happen. We're taking a drink.
Yep.
Off the top of your head. And it'll be something just so lame-o. Because there aren't contradictions in the Bible, you see. That's the problem they have.
No, that's not a problem that they have. That's a problem you have because you're just wrong about that. The fact that you can twist around the language of the Bible to be completely unrecognizable in order to wish away contradictions doesn't actually mean that there are no contradictions, right? It's like those people who do who try to figure out how to fix plot holes in movies by imagining elaborate headcanons that don't really make a whole lot of sense, but they kind of get rid of the plot hole. Oh, okay, cool, I guess. It's all over the place, right? Star Trek, Star Wars, there are all sorts of areas where the continuity doesn't quite line up. Here's a good one. Hey, what planet did Zefram Cochrane grow up on? The guy who, according to Star Trek, invented warp drive for the Federation. Actually, who did he invent it for? When Zefram Cochrane first appears on screen, it's in TOS, where he's the famous Zefram Cochrane from Alpha Centauri, who invented warp drive that allowed the Federation to get faster ships. Come to first contact, Zefram Cochrane is a guy from Bozeman, Montana. There is no Federation, and he has the first interstellar-capable craft that humanity has ever built. These are contradictions. Now, you can go find people who've constructed elaborate stories to try to twist around, well, you see, later on in life, humans colonized, the Alpha Centauri system, and then Zefram Cochrane stayed there to teach for a little while. That's why he became known as Zefram Cochrane from Alpha Centauri, but then he went back to Earth to appear in that promotional video for the Warp 5 project so that he could, hype up the project for the humans. And then later in TOS, when they said that it was about the Federation ships, they were just misspeaking. Okay, great, you can come up with some crazy concoction story that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and seems extremely unlikely. But what actually happened is that the writers of of that one movie and that one episode didn't talk to each other, and the later one didn't really care to align his story with the former one because he had a story in mind, and it wasn't the same one as the first guy. That's what actually happened. And that's what happens in the Bible. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I preached a little. Ron warned you I preach sometimes. Okay, next. And here's their story, and they're sticking to it. They're bacteria turned into fish, turned into amphibians, to reptiles, to mammals, to cavemen, and then to us. That's the evolution story.
No, it's not. Let's take a drink. Neither bacteria, nor amphibians, nor reptiles are anywhere in the lineage of humans. You are not descended from any reptiles. You're not descended from any... Well, I am, but you guys aren't. You're not descended from any amphibians. And you still are a fish, essentially. And you're not really descended from bacteria, either. You share a common ancestor with these things. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Cartoon, next. Now, here's what Roger Lewin said in Science magazine in 1982. I'm going to wrap this up with the frustrations they're having, the jig is up guys feeling that they're getting, and then what I think they're going to do about it, and who they're going to tap, and who
is up.
Guys, remember, this video was made 30 years ago. I'm telling you, creationists have been saying that evolution is a few years away from complete collapse for almost 50 years now, if not actually 50 years or more. It's ridiculous.
It's and the Discovery Institute says it too. At some point, it almost feels like it's like the ravings of a lunatic in an insane asylum. I don't.
Honestly, it reminds
me.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know how else to think about. Like, all right, any day now, any day now, any day now. Okay, you know.
It has the same energy as like all those people who like every few years have say that, oh, I have figured out the day of the rapture, and all you non-Christians are going to be so sorry on, and then they pick a day that's like 3 months in the future, and then nothing happens every single time. In part because even if Christianity is true, the rapture isn't, because that's not even in the Bible. But hey. Rosina Apophenia sufferer Keller for $9.99 says, instead of an interaction with a shampoo bottle, I imagine that these people are arguing with a TV show and saying that it was a real conversation between two people. Yeah, that's another good analogy there, or way to think about it. I don't know. Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra for $2 says, r/age like milk fodder incoming. Yeah, seriously. And it's perennial too. Like they keep on doing it, and it keeps on being wrong. Amazing stuff. All right, here we go.
Who's going to rise up and save evolution this time? Roger Lewin said, natural selection can weed out some of the complexity and slow down some of the information decay that results in speciation somehow. It may have a stabilizing effect, but it does not promote speciation or the origin of new species.
I mean, he's wrong. This 40-year-old quote is wrong about it not promoting speciation, but he's right that it is not a creative force, because no one has ever said that natural selection is a creative force.
It is not a creative
guy.
Sorry?
So I've never even heard of this guy before.
Nor have I.
Evolutionary Theory Under Fire in 1980. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't... So he co-authored a book with Richard Leakey. Okay, so he's done like some human evolution stuff, like some books that he has co-authored with like actual paleontologists or whatever. But like I've literally never heard of this dude. So he's not a paleontologist. He's not a scientist. He's just a popular science writer.
Okay.
So
probably why he's writing in Science Magazine, not a journal.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Creative force, as many people have suggested. You see, a lot of people think that, natural selection is some kind of magic wand. A lizard needs to evolve wings and feathers and turn into a bird and fly, so evolution...
I'm going to take a drink.
True.
Okay. The only person I'm aware of who thinks that lizards evolved into birds is David Peters. The guy who thinks that dolphins are tenrecs. That guy is a complete loon. There are no lizards in the evolutionary history of birds. Lizards themselves didn't even evolve until like the late Jurassic, if I remember correctly, which I might not be. So, don't believe that one out of hand. Just look it up. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I know that there were no lizards in the Triassic. There were lizards in the Cretaceous, and I believe it wasn't until like late into the Jurassic that we have our first lizards. So, no. In fact, lizards are, as far as I know, younger than birds or contemporaneous with the evolution of birds. Icarus says, the Bible is like Star Trek, Dapper 2024. I mean, in some ways, yeah, it is, right? Because it's telling stories it's various stories being told by different individuals for different purposes at different times, with different audiences in mind, with different styles, and with some concern for continuity, but not such an overriding concern for continuity that it actually leaves no plot holes. So yeah, there are ways in which the Bible is a lot like Star Trek. I actually endorse this stand.
Evolution just magics it up. Natural selection can't make anything. All it can do is select from what's already there.
Yay, he's right for once.
Here's something very interesting. This is showing the frequency of mutations.
Okay. So here's the thing. This is the distribution. This is the version of Moto Kimura's distribution that John Sanford put in his book Genetic Entropy. Right? So Moto Kimura was working on what is called neutral theory, which means he wanted to look at how evolution works at the genetic level in the absence of selection. And so he was using population genetics and things like effective population size to select what is called the no selection zone, which is the area in which the strength of natural selection for that level of fitness effect is lower than the strength of genetic drift. Now, in his original distribution, he actually left the positive side of this fitness distribution blank. The reason he did that is because whenever he allowed any positive or beneficial mutations into his simulations, he ended up having them always come to fixation very quickly in a way that swamped the neutral variation he was trying to look at. So he had to artificially pretend that there just weren't any, even though he knew and said in his paper that he knew that there were some. He basically just said, I can't make a model if I include them, so I won't include them. Later, John Sanford took this paper, grabbed this graph, added in a tiny sliver of positive mutations in his own version of it, and said that the reason that Moto Kimura ignored them was not because they swamped his math at realistic levels or even at minuscule levels. Instead, John Sanford lied about Moto Kimura's work and said that he didn't include them because they were so vanishingly rare, which is the direct opposite of what Kimura actually said in his own paper. I remember the first time I was presented with this, it was before I was even on YouTube. Some creationist was like, well, you don't know about the no selection zone and Sanford's work and Moto Kimura and all this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me go read Moto Kimura's paper. And I read it, and I realized, oh, none of the creationists sharing this have any clue what they're talking about. They're all just wrong. And the ones who know better are lying. So yeah, I've been familiar with this argument for before I was even on YouTube.
This is showing how extreme a mutation is. If it's so good that it gives a species an advantage, then it's kept. If it's so bad that it gives a species a disadvantage, then it's lost by that animal dying, and the other one is kept by that animal surviving better.
It's a nitpick, but evolution happens for all organisms. It's not just animals. Plants, fungi, bacteria, algae, they all do natural selection and evolution. So, and look, I know I make that mistake too. I'm an animal chauvinist, subconsciously, just like everyone else here probably is. Sorry, plants.
And having more offspring, because it's superior, the fittest. Well, this zone here...
Also, fitness isn't about superiority. This is science. It's not about judgment calls. Being fit means that you have more reproductive success than your neighbors. Doesn't have anything to do with being in some way intrinsically better. So, yeah.
Here is the zone of mutations that make such a slight difference that they don't matter.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink because that's also not how this works. So, like I said, this is the zone in which the operation of genetic drift is stronger than that of selection. So selection will tend to reduce the frequency of deleterious mutations and increase the frequency of positive mutations. But those are always subject to drift, which is basically just chance-based, right? So let's suppose you have a slightly deleterious mutation, right? Like you're a deer and you have a fur color that is just a little bit easier to spot for predators. Okay, but it's not a big difference. And it might just be that as a result of just sheer chance, you end up having more offspring than some of the deer that have slightly better camouflage coat color. Okay, well then guess what? The next generation is going to have a higher proportion of your allele for coat color. Whatever, that's fine. And depending on the effective population size, your slightly deleterious coat color could actually reach fixation in the population, and then the whole population has it, even though technically it's a deleterious mutation. But it's not deleterious enough to overcome the strength of drift. Now, the important thing is that the strength of drift is inversely proportional to effective population size. Because the smaller the population is, the more likely you are to have big changes as a result of just drift. Think about it this way, right? If you are rolling, say you're rolling dice, right? You have a whole collection of 6-sided dice. When you roll 1, every number is equal probable. So it doesn't matter what number you're hoping for or what you think the statistics are. If you roll 1 die, you're just going to get a number, and there's no real way to predict it. But if you roll 2 dice, suddenly you start getting a distribution. 7 is the most likely. 12 and 2 are very, very unlikely. And as you keep adding more dice, the average on the roll keeps going up by 3.5. That's always the most likely. And the far distant edges become less and less and less likely, which means that the result of your roll is less determined by chance the more dice you roll. And so you can kind of think of reproduction like this. the bigger the effective population, the less and less it is that the results of what genes do what will be solely down to chance. Because with such a big population, fitness effects will stay the same strength, but that randomness of genetic drift will go down in strength in terms of determining how the genes will change in the next generation. And so you can't simply say that a mutation has such a small fitness effect that it can't be acted on by natural selection. You have to also factor in the effective population size. Jackson, you got anything to add on that? Sorry, I feel like I've been monopolizing
That sounded
this.
good to me.
Okay. Now, I did not in this make a clear distinction between census population and effective population. Effective population takes into account things like how much genetic variation there is in the population overall, as well as the structure of the population, its tendency towards random or non-random mating, things like that. So that's a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm able to talk about right now. So yeah, we're just gonna know that there are more nuances than just that. But let's see. Astrotraumatic in Navy Soldier Reation Ryu for $4.99 says, "Hey, I like plants. My name Aster Ryu partially comes from my favorite plant, Aster amelis, among others." Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, I like plants too. I just recognize that I, like many people, do suffer from a bit of plant blindness, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that.
I like plants. I try to, bring them up when I can, but most people just don't care about them. Just sad.
I mean, I really like plants. There's a whole lot of really cool plants around here in Arizona. I really like all the Sonoran desert flora.
The series I'm doing, I'll have a couple of episodes on plants, but I've still got a ways to go. And the episodes about plants kind of shove a whole lot into them all at once, because the person who wrote the book that I'm reviewing was a zoologist and also therefore an animal chauvinist. So plants just kind of get shoved in.
Alex Markle says, "Loving the verbose tangents, keeping the psychic damage at bay." You're welcome.
Look what it says in the caption. "I cannot draw this part of the mutation distribution small enough, so a relatively large triangle is shown instead."
Yeah, but that's Sanford's work. That's not the actual original Moto Kimura. So you're just saying, hey, look, this other creationist also pretended that positive mutations don't really exist in any meaningful sense. Taking a drink for that.
That's the one he's talking about. The good mutations, the positive mutations. Even with beneficial mutations greatly exaggerated, it becomes obvious that essentially all beneficial mutations will fall within Kimura's no selection zone. Well,
okay, so says Sanford. Sanford is wrong. In fact, I firmly believe Sanford is lying. I think Sanford knows better. Hey, Sal. Yeah, I'm calling your buddy a liar. You could watch any of my videos in which I call him a liar and respond to those. Just putting it out there.
If they fall in the no selection zone, then how can natural selection select them to be kept?
Okay, here, we're going to have a poll right now. Okay. We're going to start a poll. Do you think Bad Jackson knows what the no selection zone is and how its size is determined? Yes, no, of course, turtle. I should probably spell turtle right. And I'll start the poll. There you go, everybody. Let me know if you think that whether or not Bad Jackson knows what the no selection zone. In the meantime, though, I'm going to take this opportunity to go on a quick intermission so I can get another drink, because what is now in my glass is mostly water and no longer mostly Mountain Dew Baja Blast. So, hard Mountain Dew Baja Blast. So, Jackson, you can feel free to get yourself a drink, and we are going on a quick intermission. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking with me. Those of you who did, which seems like it's basically everyone. Before we get back into it, I do want to do my quick, after the break, little talk, which is to say that, guys, this channel is almost entirely supported directly through the donations and support of my viewers. Virtually none of the money that this channel makes is directly from things like YouTube ad revenue. And this channel is currently self-sustaining. It is what your direct support is what lets me basically work on channel stuff full time. I spend most days 8 to 14 hours working on channel stuff, whether it be finding new things to cover, researching, going through papers for new videos, script writing, animating, recording audio, editing, all that stuff. And I gotta say, the only reason that's possible is because of your support. If you're currently looking to support and you're not currently supporting, or you're just looking to up your support, there are some great ways to do it. The best one, as far as me keeping the money that you send, is Patreon. There's a Patreon link in the description. It starts at $1 a month. You can go get a 50% discount if you go annually. At higher tiers, you get more rewards. Even at the lowest tier, you get access to dozens of hours of Dapper Dinosaur content in early access. You get access to my super secret Discord server. It's only for supporters. You can get your name in the credits at the $5 level and up. Also, there's the channel memberships. I do get to keep a little bit less of that, but it still has a very similar pricing system. It starts at $1.99. At the $5 level, you can get your name in the credits. You get access to the same Discord server. You get access to the same early access videos. The difference in time between me getting early access on Patreon and the memberships is usually under a minute, right? Because I had to separately set them up, but still, it's like under a minute that you get access to these videos. That's another great way. You can also, if you're a member, you get your name in green, you get the fancy little symbol after your name. So there you go. If a monthly or an annual thing is what you want to do, there are other options. There's a merch store linked right under this video. There's a whole merch shelf. You can scroll through it. There's t-shirts, there's hoodies, there's mugs. If you don't like any of the designs there, or any of the products there, click on one of them anyway. It'll bring you right to the Teespring store, where you can browse through the entire list of items that I have for sale. There's also a Amazon wish list, which is mostly stuff for when I need to basically prevent burnout, like when I'm just kind of relaxing. Also, Jens van Broekhoven sends a €3 thumbs up super sticker. Thank you very much, Jens van Broekhoven. Nice to see you. I feel like it's been a little while. And yeah, look, if financially you just can't afford it, or you're just not interested, that's fine. You do not have to support this channel financially if you can't afford it or don't want to. In fact, if you can't afford it, please don't. But still, whether or not you're supporting financially, please hit like, share this video, watch a few of my videos after this. It really helps. And also comment on my videos. But don't mention the algorithm, because YouTube knows better. All right, with that being said, Jackson, ready for some more Jackson?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
They'll be lost through genetic drift then. This completed picture, which is correct, makes...
Actually, no, they won't just be lost through genetic drift. They could also fix through genetic drift, because fundamentally, Fat Jackson doesn't know what drift is. Alleles are both lost and reach fixation through drift, as well as just go back and forth in terms of representation in the population. So I'm taking a drink. And this drink, by the way, is just original flavor Hard Mountain Dew. And then for $4.99, Roxana Apophenia Sufferer Keller says, "This is such a busy week for Dapper. I don't know how he does it." It wasn't originally going to be this busy, but then circumstances happened, and it is busy now.
Aggressive evolution on the genomic level, virtually impossible. Now, this is known data.
No, it's
Impossible? What?
It's not even data. It's not known data. It's not data at all. Do you know how much data Sanford used when he made his corruption of Moto Kimura's graph? Literally none. He was eyeballing it for a popular level book that had a library and a UFO on the cover. That's the level of scholarship we're talking about here with that Sanford book. This is complete nonsense.
Observed things, even harmful mutations, mostly fall within the no selection zone. They're not bad enough that the thing dies. Either that or
And that is why we're talking about Sanford, because he is trying to use Moto Kimura's work incorrectly to then pretend that genetic entropy is a thing. Because this is from Genetic Entropy, the Mystery of the Genome, or whatever the subtitle is, in which Sanford tries to argue that because so many of these deleterious mutations are in the so-called no selection zone, which he also does not realize can vary in size, he makes no acknowledgement of that in his book. But that because of this, and because there are so few beneficial mutations, which again is just not true, that therefore the fitness of organisms is going to go down over time until eventually it gets so low that they just all kind of die. Which, none of that is how anything works. DM Original Institute Academic Wing for $2 says, it's data. Sorry, it's not data. Is it lore? Well, I think before it can be lore, it has to actually be something someone knows about. So, got another one in there. Also, Lieutenant Professor Savage Corporal for $2 says, genomic. Yeah, creationists have a tendency to say genomic weird. I don't know why. Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, I didn't see this same graph. Oh, sorry, didn't I see the same graph in yesterday's video, but in yellow? Quite possibly. Creationists love to misuse Moto Kimura's graph. They just love it. And I really hate it. So I don't hate the original graph. I hate their misuse of the graph. All right, here we go.
it kills it right away. And who wrote this? This is from a book written by John Sanford.
Hey, I'm going to call it a confirmed prediction. Here's a drink.
A professor emeritus at Cornell University, Dr.
By the way, in case you don't know, professor emeritus means like you're technically listed as on the staff, but you don't have to do anything. It's like, yeah, it doesn't. It's basically you're not a professor, but they kind of like you, so you get to say that you are. Not that it's like a punishment, right? It's usually reserved for people who are basically retired, but you know, both the school and the person would like to be able to stay associated. Sure. So, yeah.
Sanford is a leading researcher in genetics of plants. He
was a leading researcher in the genetics of plants. He hasn't been that for, as far as I can tell, several decades.
Invented the gene gun.
And it's odd that most of the stuff that he publishes is on paleontology of primates. That's super weird.
And it gets no traction when he does that. However, his work on plant genetics did in fact get traction, and he did invent the gene gun, so this is true. We'll take a drink. Okay, here we go.
How many have ever heard of the gene gun? Okay, well, it's special
here. There you go.
Hey, wait. I'm not going to have a new poll for that. But I am going to end the current poll. So we'll see how that did. Let's see. So, how many of you think that Bad Jackson knows that what the no selection zone is and how its size is determined? No was 67% of the audience. Turtle was 30%, and only 2% think the answer is yes, with a total participation of 49 votes. So there you go.
Used in genetic engineering in plants. Dr. Sanford, now that he's an emeritus professor and he's gone through the tenure process and all, now he can say what he thinks and come out as a creationist.
No, he could have before. In fact, he largely did.
And he's published this book called The Mystery of the Genome.
The genome. Yeah.
Genome. I think it's Genetic Meltdown and the Mystery of the Genome. And you can find that on the website at Answers in Genesis.
You sure can. You know where you can't find it? In any scientific papers ever. That's where you can't find it. Except, I think there might have been a few published critiquing it. But that's about it.
And this is the main finding, one of the main findings in his book.
No, it's one of the main allegations in his book. There are no findings in that book. I read that book. It is abysmal. It is, not only is it annoying to read, it is essentially devoid of any actual scientific analysis. It is almost entirely just argument by analogy, which is not a good way to do science. The actual conclusions it reaches are not met in the real world when we actually examine real populations. We see sustained fitness growth in many populations, both in the lab and in the wild. There is no evidence that the organisms which, according to the mechanisms of genetic entropy put forth by John Sanford, should already have been extinct within human history. Like, they're just not. Like, if you take his idea seriously, we shouldn't have fruit flies, right? Because at the rate at which he says that humans are going to go extinct, fruit flies should have gone extinct like millennia ago, even if we assume the timeline of, young Earth creationism. Or if we assume that the perfect fruit fly was around when people started experimenting on them, they still should be extinct in like 200 or 300 years, right? Bacteria should be completely gone because they don't even have the mechanisms that help them reduce the alleged genetic entropy that, diploid sexually reproducing organisms have. Like, nothing about this works. Right? There's that famous, I think it's Feynman talk, where he's like, if your theory contradicts experiment or observation, it's wrong. And guess what? Genetic entropy contradicts both. It's wrong. It's just not true.
Mutations can't make evolution happen. But he's not alone, even among evolutionists, in thinking this next.
He's not an evolutionist in any normal sense of the word.
But first I wanted to point this out. Scott Todd, a professor at Kansas State University in 1999, said in Nature magazine, the premier journal of science in the world, said this: even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, who's the intelligent designer? God. Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic.
I would actually disagree. You could have a naturalistic designer. So, okay, that's great. But the data also don't point there.
Isn't that what the DI says about aliens?
Well, it's what they used to say about aliens.
They pretend to be like, yeah, it could have been aliens, wink, wink, except none of us here believe that, but it could have been aliens.
I think they're less likely to pretend that they think it could be aliens nowadays, but yeah, they did used to say that. They're now much more open about it's just God.
Yeah, the veneer is dropped.
I think they've realized that they're just making no headway with anyone but Christians. Maybe some Muslims. And there's no point in continuing up the charade that they're not all Christian theists of some stripe or another. So I think they've just given up on that. Which, hey, you know what? I'd rather have them be honest about it. So.
Even if all the data points to God, I won't believe, because it's supernatural, not natural. What the supernatural stuff?
I'm sorry, I don't know what just happened with the audio. That wasn't my choice.
Yeah, that was whack.
It's actually real. Then God's a fact of the universe.
Apparently now this is being spoken in a cavernous bathroom or something. I have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
And you're a fool for not allowing him into the equation. That's not science. That's not logic. It's not good thinking.
I don't know if it's logic or good thinking, but science is of necessity naturalistic. We're going to talk about why that is. I'll take a drink first, though, because this is stupid. Okay, so why does science generally not allow supernatural causation as an option? Well, fundamentally, because the supernatural agents that people like Charles Jackson would like to invoke aren't the kinds of things that can be reliably tested, right? So, for instance, if there were a certain number of prayers that would consistently cure cancer, then maybe we would allow prayer to God in as a medical treatment, and then maybe we would have to reassess whether or not something supernatural like God should be excluded from science. But as far as I know, even the people who are saying that God is totally real and that prayers can cure cancer don't think there's a predictable number of prayers or period of time spent in prayer or number of people praying that will then lead to the cancer cure, right? That's why they always say things like, God works in mysterious ways, you have to leave it up to God's hands or whatnot. That's fundamentally because it's not predictable. You cannot put prayer in a test tube. You can't put God on a scale. You can't measure how fast God moves. None of this works. And so you cannot use God as an explanation that then allows you to make useful predictions about future data. That's why, even in young Earth creationism, they tend to avoid miracles to the maximum extent possible, because they want the veneer of scientific credibility. And they know that the more miracles they have, the less of that they have, because they also know that invoking miracles is not a real explanation in science. Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra for $5 says he's apparently using a potato for a microphone too. Yeah, I don't know what it is with Charles Jackson and basically just being allergic to high quality audio and video. The only thing I can think of is that he's kind of like, you know how Bigfoot is just a blurry creature, and that's why all the photos of him are blurry?
Right.
Charles Jackson is just a low definition person. Like, you look at him in real life, and he's just in 360p.
He's like a Dapper. Do you watch Smiling Friends?
I don't.
Well, it's a funny cartoon, but the artistic styles of the characters like vary wildly. So you'll have like 3D characters and 2D characters, and some of them are like poorly rendered, like animated characters. So that's kind of like what
Nice.
Charles Jackson is.
I like it.
Yeah. It's a good show.
Certainly not good theology. Next. Well, here's Dr. Schwartz again, and he's pointing out this in 2007. The history of organic life is undemonstrable. We cannot prove.
By the way, if we keep up with this audio, I'm not going to do this video again. This will just be
fair.
the last video with this
That
particular.
is very fair.
Yeah, because this is making my ears bleed a little bit. So like, this keeps up. I might have to go get take a break and go get some tissues to stuff in my ears.
That's fair. That's right. Didn't we look up this guy before and like something was weird about him?
That sounds about right, but I don't remember what it was.
Was it this guy? No, maybe not. Well, he's yeah, I'd never heard of this dude before, but he's a yeah, he's an anthropologist.
Oh yeah, he was an anthropologist who has all sorts of weird crackpot ideas, wasn't he? That, like, no one takes seriously.
So.
That sounds
something
familiar.
like that. Yeah, I believe that. I believe it was something like that. I don't quite remember what exactly, but it was like something weird because we looked him up last time.
Cognitive Trifurcation says, "You think you have it bad? I'm a producer at a radio station. This hurts me on every level." Oh, I'm sorry. Ugh, yeah. I'm sorry. I did not know that this audio quality change was going to happen. So, like I said, if this doesn't change by the time we're done today, we're not coming back to this video. We'll just move on to a different video. I already have a video downloaded. And I actually even cleaned up that audio because it was way too noisy.
A whole lot in evolutionary biology, and our findings will always be an educated guess, a hypothesis, an educated guess.
That's just science. I'm going to drink for this whole, why is science?
Why is science indeed?
It is hard to find any group of people who profess as loudly to love science while understanding it as little as young Earth creationists. They're always going on about how, we love science. We just love the true science. Oh, science is great. And then, they'll be presented with, increasing precision in measurements that change the stated average value for the measured whatever it is. And they're like, oh, how can you... They're changing their story. Or, someone will say, hey, look, we found a new fossil, and it gives us new insight into the evolution of this lineage. And then they'll be like, I can't believe they're changing their story. Evolution doesn't have any consistency. Dude, you just don't know what science is. And you're complaining about science doing science. You clearly don't love science. You hate science. You hate it at a very deep and fundamental level.
There is one true evolutionary history of life, and whether we will actually ever know it is not likely.
Yeah, because we'll never likely be able to resolve literally every single split that occurred between species throughout all of geological time. That's not controversial. We'll never know most of all of the events that have ever happened in the past, right? Because there are just so many events that have happened in the past that I don't even know how we would quantify it. And we're ever going to know only a tiny fraction of those. Remember earlier when I said most of the things that humans have ever done is not something that's in the historical record?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that history is nonsense and no one should study history? Because I don't think that's what that means. But it's still true. Most of the things that have happened during historical times, no one will ever know about. Think about how many people went to the market and bought a fish for stew for dinner that night.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever going to know about that. Or think about how many cups of beer have been sipped around tables throughout all of the world, throughout all of history. You think all of that's in a ledger somewhere? Because it's not. We're never going to know about those things. But that doesn't mean they didn't happen. There is an actual true sequence of events that happened throughout history, and we're not going to ever know most of it. The same is true for evolution. There is an actual, true evolutionary history to life. But the fact that we're never going to know all of it, or even most of it, doesn't mean that what we do know is invalid, and it doesn't mean that the idea itself is invalid. Just like with history, the fact that I don't know what the name of every person who ever had a beer and on which dates and times of those days they had every single one of their beers throughout all of history doesn't mean that I can't look into the history of beer. And it doesn't mean that no one ever drank beer, right? Like, that's not how this works. Taking another drink. This is incredible. And I mean that in the strict sense, in that it is hard to believe.
Most importantly, we have to think about questioning underlying assumptions. Dr. Schwartz is trying to save evolution.
No, he's just pointing out
Is
that,
he?
just like with everything else, you have to approach evolution with the same kind of skepticism and humility and willingness to be wrong that you do in all of science. This remains just why is science? And I'm taking another drink because, quite frankly, I like Mountain Dew. Rosina Apophenia Keller, for $4.99 says, that's why people post everything to social media now. Oh, goodness, yeah. Maybe there will now suddenly be a ledger of every single beer consumed since, like, the origin of MySpace. Ugh. Oh, look, I'm not going to say that I've never posted my meals on social media, but it's usually only because, like, it's a really special meal that I made. Like, I posted my my Cinco de Easter lamb tacos on social media because they were amazingly good. And I wish that Easter and Cinco de Mayo happened on the same day every year, but I know that that's impossible.
Let's question these assumptions we've always had about molecular changes in the DNA happening gradually and about...
That's not what he said.
Maybe hybrids are part of it, you know.
Hybrids are part of it, but we've known that for a very long time.
It's not just slow and gradual stuff like Darwin said. We got to question these assumptions, whether we're dealing with molecules of DNA or anything else. Next. This man here is Dr. Stephen Wolfram. I think he got his doctoral degree at about 17 years old. And
Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra for $5 says, to be fair, Bad Jackson does seem quite willing to be wrong. He just doesn't know it. Okay, you make a good point there. I guess I can't really disagree with that. Yeah.
1970s, late 70s, early 80s. Then he invented the Mathematica software and became one of those super rich computer geek guys.
Yeah, he's the one that, like, Wolfram Alpha is named after.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that you basically just type whatever it is in, and it will just be like, oh, I can read your crazy mathematical notation and just give you an answer. It's a very handy website.
Yeah.
I use it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And also, I appreciate math, because math is how I got this whole, like, tracker thing to work, where I just put in numbers, and it fills up, and, like, the percentage thing follows along with it. All that's math. All math.
Then Dr. Wolfram, who isn't a young man anymore necessarily, is hid in his townhouse for 20 years and wrote this book, which the entire scientific world waited with bated breath to hear what the boy genius would say.
I think it was to see what he would write, but you know what, that's nitpicky.
In his book, A New Kind of Science, he found and researched and looked and observed, as any scientist ought to, that there are patterns in nature, not just in the living world, but in the non-living world too. You've seen those crisscross patterns on the back of a rattlesnake or other animals. And you may have also been standing at the beach and watched as a...
Yeah, I'm wondering what the point of this is. Is it just that natural processes, like reaction-diffusion interactions, cause consistent patterns? Because, like, yeah, that's true.
That is a thing that happens.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with this information in terms of the creation evolution discussion, but, like, yep, sure is a thing. Let's see. Vince O'Connor for $4.99 says, I think someone blinded Bad Jackson with science, and he's never forgiven science since then. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Here we go. Oh, wait, for $2, Kerry Bronson says, he sounds like he has an AIG over his head. I don't think those would be so echoey. I feel like they would absorb sound more than they would cause it to echo considerably. But then again, I've never checked on the acoustic properties of any such things. Jackson, there's another video idea for you. What are the acoustic properties of a penis?
I'll get my my analysts on it right away.
Yeah, you might have to book some studio time and bring us a selection of such organs with you to test. Yeah,
Will do.
Okay.
I'll enlist all of my my assistants.
Report back. I'll expect a report on my desk in 2 weeks.
Oh, we'll get it to you in the next couple days. No.
Ooh. Jackson's about to have a party.
The wave washed back out into the ocean, and in the little rivulets in the sand, the heavier grains of sand contain the black biotite
Rivulets is a perfectly cromulent word.
mica, the black mica, actually get down into those rivulets, and they make that same crisscross. How many have ever seen that? Same little black sand crisscross pattern in a wave. Right?
I mean, I don't remember having seen that, but then again, like, I've spent the last, 15 years studiously trying to avoid being anywhere near the ocean, so, I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah. There's a story about a guy who gets out of the Navy, and he decides that he's going to pick up an oar and start walking inland until someone asks him, hey, what do you got there? And that's where he's going to settle down, in a place so far away from the water that they don't even know what an oar is.
That's fair.
And that's kind of how I feel. People are like, Dapper, come on this cruise. And I'm like, no. Like, why? It's so much fun. I'm like, I don't ever need to be at sea again. Like, but it'll be different.
I have seen the water.
Yeah, it'll be different. We go to islands and there's food and drink. I'm like, I don't care. It's on a ship. I don't want to ever be on a ship again. I just don't need to.
That's fair.
After the Navy, I've never, ever, ever wanted to go out to sea. It's never happened. I am sure that I will die without ever going to sea again. I guess I'm not sure, but I don't foresee it happening. Goop23 for $2 says, well, I mean, we know AIG is an echo chamber. Good point. Good point. I like it. And in fact, I will take a drink because I think that counts. So we'll hit the plus there. Now, Star Song, I realized that the more people super chat or gift memberships, the longer it's going to be before I hit play on Charles Jackson again, and the more likely it is that we never have to listen to this horrible audio again. So there you go. There's the way to get us to not ever have to hear this audio. Star Song for $5 says, in an ultrasound, you can hear the blood rushing through your blood vessels.
Whack.
I don't know if I knew that. That is interesting. It sounds weird. Like, I don't know if I would want to hear my own blood. Ugh. It's creepy. Alright, here we go.
Rushing back out. Pretty fast. Fast-moving water always makes that kind of pattern. Wolfram says in the living world and the non-living world, these patterns are replete. They're everywhere. The pattern that you see...
That's true.
I mean, yeah, this is just like interactions between forces, which can include things like chemical gradients and like inverse square laws and linear proportionalities and things like that, right? Like, yeah, that occurs all over the place because fundamentally, biology is chemistry, which is physics. And all these other patterns, like in sand or whatever, is just other physics operating under the same consistent set of mathematical principles. So I don't know where he's going with this. Like, how does the idea that the organisms, the living world, operates under the same mathematical principles as the non-living natural world, like, how does that indicate God? Because to me, it seems to indicate that the natural world that is not living is part of the same essential thing as the living world, and that the living world isn't ultimately separate from just the unplanned, unguided action of waves. Like, is Charles Jackson going to say that waves are actually created specifically by God to make certain patterns? Is he going to say that only God could set up the universe in such a consistent way? Because if he says that, then, I mean, okay, but that just gets you to, like, Spinoza's God. It doesn't get you to young Earth creationism. Rosana Epiphania Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, don't trust random QR codes you find on the streets or in the sheets. Good advice. Actually, I'm trying to think. I think I might have used a QR code like twice in my entire life. I just don't. Yeah, I just don't use QR codes.
I've used them quite a bit. I've been to a number of restaurants where they put the QR code for the menu on like a little thing on your table. So,
trying to think. Well, so I don't go to a lot of restaurants. I'm cheap.
That's
So yeah, I mean, I know I went to a restaurant that had an online menu last time I was downtown in Tucson. This was when I was with my friend and her cousin and Ben. And I don't think I used a QR code to find the menu, but it was online. I think I might have just gone to the website. I don't know. Whatever. It's not important.
The bracts in the flower bud follow the Fibonacci series or the golden ratio.
Kind of. They actually tend not to do that exactly. What they actually do is they follow a certain kind of spiral called a phyllotaxis spiral or a phylotactic spiral, which basically just means plant touching. And it's actually a space-filling spiral. And while it is similar to golden spirals, it's actually not exactly a golden spiral, but it is a definable spiral. I mean, I've used it in Blender to create fake plants before, because it's very good at making fake plants. But the thing is, it's literally just the best way to fill a space with a spiral pattern without leaving gaps in that spiral pattern. Which means that it's heavily selected for by natural selection, because it's the space-filling spiral that is the most energy efficient for plants. So of course that's the spiral they land on. Any other spiral would be selected again. So I don't know why that's special.
Just like the nautilus shell, the snail shell.
Nope, snail shells vary considerably. They do not all have the same spiral. They do not all. They don't even mostly follow the golden spiral. Like,
Yeah,
that's
I
just
mean,
wrong. I'm taking a drink for it. Go
There's a Raup. I can't remember what his first name was. It Peter Raup, I think. Anyway, basically came up with this like it's like a cubic chart essentially of like the different ways that cone spiral shells can be made. And yeah, there's like all sorts of different patterns you can get from those, and most of them have like nothing at all to do with, like with
the golden ratio. The
those
golden
spiral patterns. So
Yep.
He says that all of nature is unfolding to just a few very, very simple mathematical equations, which he calls cellular automatons. And he programmed
The plural for automaton is automata, not automatons. Putting it out there.
these into a computer and got some really interesting results. Now,
Cellular automata are actually really cool, and you can get really cool, very lifelike results. I just don't know how that helps creationism.
I wondered in the year 2000, when we all knew he was coming out with this book in 2002, I wondered what the evolutionists would do with this. In 2000 already...
I mean, as far as I can tell, none of the evolutionary biologists really noticed, but okay.
40,000 copies of this book had sold before it was even printed. Everyone wanted to know what Wolfram was going to say. Well, when he came out with his theory, I wonder, the evolutionist is going to say, well, you see, creationists, we don't need God. The Big Bang, the universe created these mathematical equations. Or
the Big Bang didn't create math. Math is simply an abstraction that defines how things that have relations to each other interact. That is abstracted enough to be able to be used in both pure form as well as descriptively of the universe. It's a thing humans invented. We invented it, you invented it, to describe the universe. And then later you abstracted it further beyond that. I'm taking a drink.
they're going to say, uh-oh, this is bad. Mathematical equations must be written by a mathematician. So we'll just reject Wolfram's idea of that insinuation.
Mathematical equations do have to be written by mathematicians. Mathematically described interactions happen regardless of mathematicians. You didn't need Newton to write down the equation for like the second law of motion in order for things to move according to Newton's laws of motion. Those equations are descriptive, not prescriptive. That's what's going on there. Carrie Bronson for $5 says, that spiral can be generated by simulating points repelling each other in the way of a physical or chemical stimuli. It's what we'd expect to see. Yeah, exactly. There are certain things that are just energetically efficient. And that kind of spiral is just one of them. The fact that we have to come up with math in order to accurately describe it doesn't say anything about a creator or evolution or whether, I don't know, God's a mathematician. So yeah, I can't. I'm taking another drink.
There's a God. So, yeah, I didn't know what they were going to do. What happened when Wolfram's book came out in 2002? Nothing.
Yeah. Because it's not surprising that both life and physics should have mathematical underpinnings for the patterns that exist in both of them. This isn't surprising. I don't understand why he thinks this would have been a revolution. I just don't get it. It's so often that Charles Jackson just says things, and I just do not understand what the argument is even supposed to be. Jackson, what do you know what the argument is even supposed to be?
I mean, I think in this, it's just, if there's regularity, therefore there must have been some, entity creating said regularity or order, therefore God. So there you go.
Yes, I mean, if that's the argument, he's doing a really, really shit job of explaining it.
They just poo-pooed the whole thing and went, oh, well.
I don't think that happened either. Because, I mean, it's true that life has very obvious math underpinning things like the spiral patterns in sunflower seeds, the shape of snail shells, the shape of nautilus shells. I mean, the branching patterns of trees can be described by various fractal functions. Like, this isn't exactly news to anyone. I just don't think that someone systematizing it is that important to evolutionary biology.
What's next? Now, I predict they're going to pick up Wolfram, now they need him. They need Schwartz. They need Wolfram. They need guys like Wolfram.
Oh, I think it's broken.
Something fresh. Other than the stale old Darwin idea that's dying on the vine right now as we speak.
Huh, yeah.
Watch for what happens with ANKOS.
And it only gets worse with time.
Yeah, it broke. That's not fun.
Well, if
it's okay.
I'm sorry, Dapper.
About what?
That it broke.
I'm not that sorry. It's not that big of a deal. All right, let me reshare that.
I've also been standing at the beach and watched.
Yeah, we've already seen that.
The brass in the flower bud. This book in 2002. I wondered what the evolution of what Wolfram was going to say. Well, when he came out with his theory, I wondered the evolution is going to say, "When you see."
I'm sorry.
Okay, so you can hear me. Weird. Discord sent me a message that said that there was no input from my mic. That's super weird.
Oh, I don't know. That is weird.
Creationism, we don't need gods. The Big Bang, the universe created these. There's gods. So, yeah, I didn't know what they were going to do. What happened when Wolfram's book came out in 2002? Nothing. They just poo-pooed the whole thing and went, oh, well, what's next? Now, I predict they're going to pick up Wolfram, now they need him. They need Schwartz. They need Wolfram. They need guys like Wolfram and new ideas, something fresh.
I mean, people propose new ideas in evolutionary biology all the time. That's what most papers are about. You know what it is? It's that he has absolutely no experience in actual literature, right? This guy doesn't read scientific papers. He doesn't realize that what he's talking about, oh, we need fresh ideas in science, is what's happening in most papers that are published. Like, that's what's going on in science. That's kind of the whole point. That's why in order to get your PhD, you have to do original research that other people haven't done before. It's because the whole point of being a scholar is to inject new ideas into the field. Now, granted, most new ideas never really gain traction because it turns out that there's a whole lot more ways to be wrong about something than there are to be right, and the chances are that your random new idea that you came up with is wrong. Well, okay. But that's still the whole point behind most of what's going on in all sorts of academic disciplines, whether it be sociology, whether it be history, whether it be, biology, the physical sciences, whatever.
The stale old Darwin idea that's dying on the vine right now as we speak.
I'm just going to take a drink for like, oh, Darwin is the be-all and end-all of evolutionary biology, even though we've kind of gone past Darwin and had as of like a century ago.
Watch for what happens with A and KOS. That's what they call it, but we're short of new kind of science. Next. Also, this evolutionist, who's the one who bailed out evolution back in the 1970s with her theory that mitochondria...
So Lynn Margulis.
Bailed out evolution?
Yeah, I don't know what it means for her to have bailed out evolution. There was an unknown in evolution, and she figured out what the answer was.
And the funny thing was, she kind of went overboard with the endosymbiosis stuff.
Yeah, she started saying
she thought that like every organelle was like endosymbiosis, and speciation events were primarily endosymbiosis driven. It's like, no, that's just not true.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's cool that she did in fact correctly identify that mitochondria and chloroplasts are indeed the result of endosymbiotic events. That is really cool. She did a great job on that. But like, I mean, okay, that happened. She did in fact do that.
Yeah, but it's not like the origin of mitochondria.
Evolution.
Yeah, the origin of mitochondria wasn't something that was like, oh, okay, guys, if we don't figure this out soon, we're just going to have to abandon all of evolutionary biology. Like, that was never a thing.
Yeah.
And also, you know, what is it? Chloroplasts are another good example.
Mm-hmm.
Also, maybe chromatophores in cephalopods might also be an example.
Right, and well, I mean, like, and it turns out there are like endosymbiotic events within endosymbiotic events, right? Because you have like your SAR group of eukaryotes, which basically did an endosymbiosis of red algae, which then have like, you know, their endosymbionts within them. So they have, so it's like a unicellular eukaryote, you know, if to stretch the definition of that word, that has a unicellular eukaryote inside of it, a red algae, which then has its chloroplasts and mitochondria within it. So
like
it's like, is that really unicellular? You know,
Rosina Apophinia sufferer Keller for $1.99 says, "I stand pangenesis." All right, here we go. We're gonna suffer through this a little bit more, but it looks like the audio is not coming back. So next month we're just gonna go to a different video.
Fair.
Oh, but first, for $5, preventing us from having to hear more of the Bad Jackson, Lieutenant Professor Savage Cobra says, Bad Jackson would need to scale the continental shelf to go off the deep end. Thank you. Let's update. And there we go, 70%. I don't think we're going to get that last 30%.
Chloroplasts and other little parts, inner working parts, organelles inside of every living cell really used to be bacteria that got into bigger cells. And evolutionists were happy for her theory because it explained the big jump from bacteria to normal cells. Yes,
normal cells. Charles, prokaryotic cells outnumber eukaryotic cells by orders of magnitude. Calling eukaryotes normal is to just betray that you know very, very little about the actual biodiversity and the number of cells and number of individuals of various taxa on Earth. I'm taking a drink for eukaryotic cells being normal. They're not. They're weirdos.
Bacteria doesn't have a nucleus in itself where all the DNA is. It's so much more simple. There's a huge jump. The biggest missing link in evolution, except for chemicals to living things. The second biggest link in evolution that's missing is the jump from prokaryotes to eukaryotes.
Except it's not actually missing.
It's really not. I mean, like, when you say missing, like, what do you mean? Do you mean like we're missing the fossils of it? Well, yeah, probably. I mean, that was an event that would have, I don't even know how you would recognize that in like the fossil record. I mean,
you wouldn't.
Because we're talking about the thing that would get fossilized is not a cell, right? We're talking about an organelle getting fossilized, which, yeah, good luck with that. That would have existed like what, upwards of 2 billion years ago. I mean,
something like that.
There are arguments over, or have been arguments over the apex chert, fossils, whether they're like actual cyanobacterial fossils or like some sort of geological formation. There have been arguments over that for like the past couple decades. So you think we are going to get like I don't even know what that would look like. Like you have like normal. Genuinely, I don't know what that would look like for the fossils of that. But in terms of like the chemistry that would be involved in that, like I don't know, a lot of it's kind of been worked out. We have a lot of really good evidence.
We also have modern examples of organisms that are in different stages of endosymbiosis right now.
Right. So right, and I mean, like you can point out, for instance, that there are endosymbiotic events between like different species of bacteria. So there are cyanobacteria, which some cyanobacteria can be pretty big for bacteria, and some of them have like spirochetes, which is another type. It's like a shape of bacteria. They have a spirochete bacteria within them, so as living as like a little endosymbiont. So clearly, you can have these sorts of endosymbiosis happening, even if we don't know quite exactly how that happened. But we also have archaeans. So eukaryotes are descended from an archaean that engulfed a bacterium, because mitochondria nest somewhere either around or within a group called the a phylum, quote quote, of bacteria called the alpha proteobacteria. Mitochondria are related to rickettsia, which causes typhus, not rickets.
Yes, rickets is what happens when you don't have enough vitamin D.
Yeah, rickettsia causes typhus, which is, big shock. It is an obligate intracellular parasite. So you actually can't even grow rickettsia outside of cells. I know, crazy, right? So it's not surprising that mitochondria would be related to something that is an obligate intracellular parasite, which also kind of I always bring that up as an example. I think chlamydia is another one. When people say like, oh well, to be considered an organism, it has to be able to live independently. Not really.
Yeah.
But we have a pretty good understanding of one of the hypotheses for the endosymbiotic event was what's called the hydrogen hypothesis. So basically, I won't really go into the chemistry, but in essence, you have a particular relationship between between the products that are given off by the sort of protomitochondrion and the products that are taken in by a methanogenic archaean, so an archaean that creates methane, and then can we look to nature to see if that sort of relationship exists? Oh, well, lo and behold, it sure does. We can find organisms that meet this criteria for what we would expect. And then we also have other really, really good lines of evidence that mitochondria itself is derived from bacteria. So, for instance, the start codon for archaea and eukarya is methionine. However, for bacteria, it's like I think it's informal. In the letter N dash like formyl methionine. And Dapper, do you want to guess which one mitochondria use?
I'm going to go with the latter, the bacterial one.
Yeah, it is. It's the bacterial one. That's so freaking weird. They also have their own little circular genome, just like bacteria. They have their own bacterial ribosomes. So yeah, like they have all these explicitly bacterial, machinery, which would be super weird if they didn't result from endosymbiosis. That'd be very odd. Yes. So this just seems like the best explanation for it.
And all of that is also largely true of other things like chloroplasts, which are also thought to be the result of endosymbiosis. So yeah. All right, we're going to hit play. We're only going to get a little bit more of this in, and I don't think the audio is getting fixed. So it looks like next month we're just starting a new video.
Bacteria as the little cells, and Margulis said bacteria got into bigger cells and made the nucleus, made the centrioles and the mitochondria, the chloroplasts and the Golgi apparatus and stuff like that.
Yes, and in some of those cases, she was almost certainly wrong.
That Okay.
Yeah, there's
And that was
really no
really-
evidence that the Golgi or the endoplasmic reticulum are the result of endosymbiotic events. The endoplasmic reticulum seems to be a I guess like an outpocketing, you might say, of like the nuclear membrane. Not really sure about the Golgi apparatus. I've not really read a whole lot about that.
I mean, you've
But
probably read more than I
again,
have.
But again, bacteria and archaea both have regions, or certain ones do, where they have intracellular like membranes. So they have walled off regions of their cell where they perform particular biochemical functions. That's, for all intents and purposes, that's an organelle.
Yeah.
So again, when people say like, oh well, bacteria can't be multicellular, bacteria can't be, or they can't have, or archaea can't have organelles. It's like, it's not really true.
Yeah,
I mean, they do.
They're not organelles in exactly the same way as eukaryotes have them,
Sure.
but they're subcellular structures that have particular functions that are identifiable.
Right.
Which is, I mean,
yeah.
the same basic idea as what an organelle is.
Yeah, it may not be quite as complex, which, okay, fair enough. But, like, that's kind of a gradient. So some organelles are going to be more complex than others. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it just, and like, when you look at things like cyanobacteria, like, what is it, Nostoc, I think? Nostoc punctiforme, which is so it's a cyanobacteria, and what it can do is it has division of labor. So there's a bacterium that says, all right, we're going to make food, and you're going to be a storage cell for all the food that we make.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like multicellularity.
It sure does. I mean, that's if it's not multicellularity, it's a hair's breadth away from it.
Right, yeah. Because like that's what we consider multicellularity for like eukaryotes. If you have like the experiment that or experiments that Will Ratcliffe does with the snowflake yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is unicellular, right? And so when they deemed it like it has multicellularity and division of labor, right? Is some of the individuals within the snowflakes would like undergo apoptosis and break off to form little daughter colonies. Look, and that seems like multicellularity to me. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I could be biased, but that seems like multicellularity.
Alex Markle says, "Wait, communist bacteria?" I'm going to point out that basically every economic system that's more advanced than small groups of hunter-gatherers has had division of labor. In fact, even large groups of hunter-gatherers usually use division of labor. So that is I mean, it's part of communism, but it's also part of capitalism, it's part of mercantilism, it's part of feudalism, it's part of all of the various economic systems you can think of, until you get down to like hunter-gatherer groups so small that everyone has to do everything. So, yeah.
Which is lame.
I mean, there seem to be some people who enjoy that as their way of life, and I'm not going to tell them they're lame for doing it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah. So, in fact, there are groups who actively try to resist attempts to stop them from doing that. And you know what? If that's what they want, more power to them. I don't want it, but good for them. But that's where we're going to start wrapping things up, guys, because I'm not going to subject any of us to more of this abysmal audio from Bad Jackson. It is amazingly bad. So what that means is I'm going to ask Good Jackson, what's coming up on your channel?
On my channel, I am I hope soon going to release the brine shrimp's tale.
Nice.
And I know I've probably been saying that for the last month, but I've actually recorded it and I'm in the process of making it. So
do you mention sea monkeys?
Well, brine shrimp are sea monkeys.
But do you actually mention the toy sea monkeys?
Oh, no. I do mention triops, though, which some people might recognize as another thing like sea monkeys that you can purchase and then grow, because triops are also fairy shrimp, just like sea monkeys. They're all in the same group, which is called Brachiopoda. There we go. So they're all little fairy shrimps, which some people might get upset at the idea that crustacea is paraphyletic now, and so insects are just crustaceans.
Or we could just put insects in Crustacea like they should be, and then just make it monophyletic.
Yeah.
And Insecta is just a subgroup of Crustacea. That's
Correct.
what I think we should do instead of going for like, well, it's Pan-Crustacea. Just, no, stop. Pan-Crustacea is just as dumb as Setaartiodactyla.
So,
Like, no one decided to go for Avid Dinosauria when it became clear that birds were dinosaurs.
true. Yeah.
One of my pet peeves.
So that should be coming out soon. And of course, we'll have our normal Thursday stream. I think we're talking about entropy tomorrow. Because of we had a guy on, a creationist on, I don't know, like a month or so ago, something like that, who argued that entropy destroyed evolution. And Nestle, who is my co-host for my Thursday show, typically, has had a number of very long conversations with this guy, and so Nestle pointed out that we should probably do just an episode on entropy, and I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So we'll do that instead of making fun of. Did you do the video? Did you critique Todd Wood's video about where he gives a lecture and he spends like the first 30 minutes of it explaining how the formation shows the process of evolution very nicely?
I don't think I did.
He goes through okay, if you go to this formation at the bottom, like our bacterial fossils, then you go up a little bit, and it's like unicellular eukaryotes, and you go up a little bit more, and it's the Ediacaran biota, and then you go up more, and it's the Cambrian.
That doesn't
it's the lecture Todd Wood gave. I think it's from a few years ago. Anyway, you might be interested in it. But it's just very funny because he spends the first 30 minutes we almost just straight up watched it last time because he just keeps going on and on and on and on about how yep, this really looks evolutionary, and yeah, it sure does. That's true.
By the way, for $2, Love True Music 1 says, song recommendation, Dead Sea Monkeys by Lemon Demon. Thank you very much.
So anyway, I just thought it was very funny.
It does sound funny. Alright, so what's coming up on this channel? Tomorrow at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, we will be having the premiere of the next Roger video. So that is Roger from Mud Fossil U. That code is Chemistry is Hard, Mud Fossil University and Living Volcanoes Part 1. There will be a Part 2, but it's only a 2-part series. Then the next day, so on Friday, we're going to be having premiering at the same time, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, Debate, Dumpster Fire, Robert Groen 2197 with Jackson Wheat, Mirror.
Oof.
Yeah.
That one was a hoot.
That is one way to describe it. And then the day after that, Saturday, at again, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, we are having Dapper Reacts, where we will be going over that same David Menton talk from about 10 years ago. So hopefully Vishanti will be back. She said that she plans to be back. And so that is on Saturday. Then next Tuesday is Kent with Bent. That'll be at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So I hope to see all of you tomorrow at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for the next premiere. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a safe night out there. Get some sleep if it's nighttime where you are. If it's the middle of the day or something, I don't know. Have a great day. Either way, we'll talk to you later. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Phil Ravara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Eleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Wallace, John Ackerman, Eta V, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.